Colin never used to hate silence, but these days it felt like every quiet moment pressed on his chest. Late afternoon light stretched across the narrow coastal highway as he drove his battered SUV along the edge of a steep cliff. Below him, waves crashed against black rocks, sending salty mist into the chilly northern air. He rolled the window down, just enough to let in the cool breeze that smelled of seaweed and a promise of rain. In the back seat sat Amanda, his daughter, who hadn't spoken a word in 3 years. She looked about 13, but in moments like this, the sorrow in her eyes felt far older. She was bundled in a thick hoodie, her brown hair tied in a loose ponytail that draped over her shoulder. She stared at the horizon the whole drive, never once shifting her gaze to the driver's seat, where Colin drummed anxious fingers against the steering wheel. "Kiddo, you okay back there?" he asked softly, almost knowing there would be no reply. Amanda didn't answer, just lowered her head slightly. He inhaled, forcing a calm he hardly felt. Every time he glanced in the rearview mirror, her stillness reminded him of the day his wife Amanda's mother passed away. The grief had stolen his daughter's voice, and in a way, it felt like it had stolen part of his heart too. The road curved sharply along the coastline, the battered guardrail looking like it had seen too many storms. Clouds gathered overhead, thick and silver, threatening to swallow the last gold of the setting sun. He sighed, remembering he had to pick up some groceries, maybe a new prescription for Amanda's sleeping issues. Dinner, medication, the quiet chores of a man trying to hold on to normalcy in a world that felt suspended. The wind whipped across the cliffside, shaking the SUV as he slowed for another hairpin turn. His mind flickered to the memory of his wife, her soft laugh, the way she'd press her hand to his chest and remind him to breathe. Now it was just him and Amanda in that lonely house on the slope near the sea. He worked a few hours at the local dock, fixing outboard motors and patching up fishing boats. It barely covered bills, but at least it kept them afloat, gave them something stable. He almost missed it at first, a tiny scrap of white fluttering near the edge of the highway. The fabric danced against the wind, pinned under a small stone. For a second, Colin thought it was just a piece of trash, maybe a napkin or an old plastic bag. But something about the way it flapped made his chest tighten. He eased his foot onto the brake, peering through the windshield. A wave of intuition washed over him like the tide pulling at the sand. He couldn't ignore it. "Amanda," he said quietly, glancing in the rearview mirror again. I'm gonna pull over, all right?" No response. Still, he flicked on his hazard lights and guided the SUV off the narrow road until the passenger side tires bit into loose gravel. The wind pressed harder, and an unsettling hush replaced the usual crash of waves. Stepping out, Colin zipped up his jacket and braced himself against the gust. The sky was a deepening bruise of purple and gray. He took a careful step toward the highway's guardrail, scanning the area. The white scrap was still there, pinned beneath a chunk of driftwood. His heart thudded. Could be nothing, he thought. Yet in the last few years, he'd learned to trust his gut. He reached to move the driftwood aside and then noticed footprints in the damp dirt near the guardrail. Small footprints, child-sized. His pulse kicked into overdrive. He twisted around, eyes searching for any sign of movement down the slope. About 30 yards away, the jagged cliff descended into scattered rocks and patches of wild grass. And then he saw it, a figure hunched near a boulder. He barely registered the cold as he hopped the guardrail, carefully maneuvering down the uneven ground. His sneakers slipped on loose gravel, but he pressed on. The wind whipped at his hair, stinging his eyes with salt. 10 yards closer, he could make out 2 figures, one small, slumped on the ground, and another crouching beside it. The smaller figure looked limp, face half buried in the dirt. The other was trembling, arms wrapped around the still form. "Hey!" Colin called, voice trembling. "Are you all right?" He watched the crouching figure lift its head. He realized it was a boy, maybe 10 years old. The boy's eyes were wide and glassy, brimming with tears. His clothes were soaked, a large bruise forming along his jaw. "It's my brother," the boy croaked, voice hoarse and weak. He won't wake up." Colin's chest squeezed. Another child? He hurried closer, kneeling on the rocky ground. The younger boy, maybe 6 or 7, was unconscious. His face was ashen. hair matted with salt water or sweat. Colin pressed a hand to the child's forehead. He felt feverish or maybe just chilled to the bone. "We've got to get him warmed up," Colin muttered. He flicked his gaze to the older boy. "Kid, can you stand?" The boy gave a shaky nod, tears threatening to spill. I think so." "All right, let's do this carefully." With a grunt, Colin lifted the younger boy into his arms. The child was frighteningly light, like he hadn't eaten in days. The older brother stumbled beside him, panting in shallow bursts, clearly on the edge of collapsing too. The trek back to the SUV was grueling. Gravel slipped underfoot and the wind battered them from all sides, howling in protest. By the time they reached the guardrail, the older boy was wheezing. Colin managed to haul both kids to the passenger side of the SUV. The windows were fogged. Amanda was still inside, watching with wide eyes. Colin tugged the back door open, gently laying the unconscious boy across the back seat. The older one slid in next to him, still trembling. "Amanda," Colin said, his voice low. "Hey, can you scoot over? Let him rest his head on your lap or something just to keep him from sliding around." Amanda tensed. Then slowly she shifted to the corner, letting the smaller boy's head rest on a folded jacket. Colin exhaled, grateful. He reached up to start the SUV. The engine sputtered once, then died. "No, no, no," he groaned, turning the key again. Silence. He tried a third time, just a click. Frustration spiked. "Come on, baby. Not now," he muttered, popping the hood release. He stepped outside, the wind nearly ripping the door from his hand. Under the hood, the engine still felt warm, but there was a faint smell of something burnt. One glance at the fuse box told him a wire had come loose. "Damn it!" he hissed, rummaging in the glove compartment for tape or a piece of rubber to secure the connection. Behind him, a small voice spoke. "Sir?" He spun. The older boy, cheeks red from cold, had leaned out the back seat. "Mom told me once, if the truck smells like hot metal, check the red wire, near the fuse." It was exactly the spot Colin was focusing on. Surprised, he nodded. "Yeah, I see it. I just need to fix this real quick." Using a strip of duct tape and a few improvised moves, Colin sealed the exposed section and prayed it would hold. Then, back in the driver's seat, he twisted the key. The SUV rumbled, then roared to life. Relief whooshed out of him in one breath. "Thank God," he murmured. He adjusted the rearview mirror, heart pounding as he watched the kids in the back. The older boy was stroking his brother's hair. Amanda kept her distance but didn't protest the intrusion. Colin pulled onto the road, flipping on the hazard lights as he accelerated, ignoring the ominous swirl of clouds above. He glanced at the boy, who was still trembling with fear. "I'm Colin. We'll get your brother warmed up. Then we'll figure out what's going on." The boy gulped, voice trembling. "My name is Benjamin. That's Caleb. Please, please help him." Colin nodded, pressing the gas pedal harder. "I will," he said, heartbeat hammering. "I promise." They sped along the cliffside highway, the SUV's headlights cutting through the growing darkness. For a moment, the only sounds were the engine's steady hum and the ragged breathing of two frightened kids in the back seat. Amanda lifted her gaze, meeting Colin's eyes in the mirror. He could see worry there, and maybe something else, recognition that, just like 3 years ago, everything was about to change. Wind whipped around the SUV as Colin pulled off the narrow highway and onto the old gravel lane leading home. The sky had grown darker, and flashes of distant lightning illuminated the jagged horizon. The short drive felt like miles. In the back seat, Caleb lay slumped against Amanda's hoodie, his shallow breaths making Colin's stomach twist. Benjamin sat with one arm over his little brother, eyes scanning every detail of the interior, as if expecting something to jump out at them. The moment they arrived, Colin parked near the wooden steps that led up to his house, a small, single-story cottage perched on a grassy slope overlooking the ocean. The battered siding and chipped paint showed its age, but it was home. He turned the ignition off, then swiveled around. "Benjamin, can you walk?" he asked softly. Benjamin's gaze flicked from the floor to Colin's face. "Yeah." He sounded uncertain but nodded. Colin gently lifted Caleb. "Amanda, open the door for me, okay?" Her eyes darted from Colin to the unconscious boy in his arms, but she followed directions. A cold gust slammed into them the second they stepped outside, salty air stinging their faces. Benjamin stumbled across the gravel, arms wrapped around himself. "Don't worry," Colin muttered, shifting Caleb's weight. "Inside, it's warmer." They trudged up the creaking wooden steps. Amanda unlocked the door and stepped aside. The living room lights were off, but a faint glow from the single overhead bulb in the kitchen cast long shadows. The place was humble: a threadbare couch, a coffee table covered in old magazines, and a small TV balanced on a wobbly stand. The walls smelled faintly of damp wood and brine. Colin nudged aside a couple of blankets on the sofa, laying Caleb down with all the care he could muster. The kid's eyes fluttered behind half-closed lids, breath still shallow. Benjamin stood at the edge, hands balled into fists, trembling from cold and fear. Amanda hovered near the doorway, her shoulders tight. "Benjamin," Colin said, stripping off his own jacket. "Put this on. You're soaked, buddy." The boy hesitated, then slipped it on. It dwarfed him, but at least it offered some warmth. "Let me see," Colin continued, crouching beside the sofa. He pressed the back of his hand to Caleb's cheek. Too cold. "We need to warm him up." He reached for a woolen blanket he kept folded on the armchair and carefully tucked it around the younger boy. Benjamin watched every move like a hawk. "Where were you two coming from?" Colin asked gently. Benjamin's gaze flicked to Amanda. She stood behind them, silent. He licked his lips, hesitating. We didn't have anywhere else to go. Mama said, she said if something happened, keep going until we can't walk anymore." He swallowed. "But then she never came back." Colin's heart pounded with a sympathy that bordered on heartbreak. He glanced up to find Amanda's stare locked on him, her expression torn between caution and concern. "I see," he whispered. "Okay, well, you're safe now." At that, Benjamin's eyes glistened. He seemed too proud to cry, but the relief on his face was tangible. He rested a hand on Caleb's forehead, brushing the boy's damp curls aside. Colin stood. "I'll heat up some soup. Amanda, could you—" He paused, remembering she never answered verbally. "Could you just keep an eye on them for a minute?" Amanda didn't nod or speak. Instead, she just stayed put, arms wrapped around herself. It was enough of a response for Colin, so he went into the small kitchen area. He flicked on the overhead light, revealing scratched countertops and a single-burner portable stove. Rummaging through a cabinet, he found a can of tomato soup. As the soup heated, the wind battered the windows. Colin's thoughts swirled. Who were these kids? Why had their mother told them to run? And what had happened to her? He tried to focus on immediate concerns: calories, warmth, rest. When the soup finally bubbled, he filled a large mug. He also grabbed some saltine crackers from a half-open box. Then he returned to the living room. Amanda stood near the couch. She must have draped another blanket over Benjamin, who knelt next to Caleb. She looked at Colin with a subtle question in her eyes, but said nothing. "All right," Colin murmured. "Let's try to get some food in you, Benjamin. Then we'll see if Caleb can take anything when he wakes up." Benjamin took the mug with shaky hands, inhaling the steam. "Thank you," he said, voice almost too soft to hear. He sipped carefully. Colin used this chance to check Caleb's pulse still there, still too light. He hoped the kid would come around soon. In the corner, Amanda shifted her weight, arms still hugging herself like she was guarding a secret. "Any injuries I should know about besides the bruise on your brother's forehead?" Colin asked. Benjamin shook his head slowly. "Not really." Then he frowned. "Some scrapes, I guess. We had to. Hide in some bushes. He fell." Colin fought the urge to pepper him with more questions. "Who was chasing you? Where's your mother?" But it felt wrong to push so soon. These boys needed safety before they needed an interrogation. "That's all right," he said softly. "We'll figure it out. For now, you guys can stay here." Benjamin's eyes darted around the room like the idea of staying was both a relief and a risk. A hint of tension eased out of his small shoulders. "Thank you," he repeated. Amanda took a half step forward, then froze. She lowered her gaze as if uncertain whether to help or keep her distance. Colin's chest tightened. Amanda had kept to herself for so long. Maybe this was the first time she'd seen someone else hurting more visibly than she was. He cleared his throat. "Amanda, honey, could you grab some extra pillows from your room? The closet near your bed?" She hesitated, then slipped down the short hallway, disappearing into the darkness. Colin turned back to the two boys. "She's, quiet," he explained gently. "Going through something." Benjamin just nodded, sipping more soup. Amanda returned, carrying 2 pillows pressed against her chest. She set them down near Caleb's feet, her gaze flickering uncertainly between the unconscious boy and her father. She lingered, as if wanting to say something, but no words emerged. "Thanks, kiddo," Colin murmured. Outside, the ocean roared, wind rattling the windows. Caleb stirred slightly, mumbling incoherent syllables. Benjamin set the mug aside and bent close to him, whispering, "Caleb, hey, it's me." Colin rubbed his own tired eyes. 1,000 questions swarmed his mind, but one thought stood out. He had done the right thing by stopping. For the first time in a long while, he felt a surge of purpose, like maybe he wasn't drifting aimlessly anymore. He glanced at Amanda, who stood there in the dim overhead light. Her silence shouted 100 unspoken emotions. The way she watched these boys told him she was scared, but maybe also curious. He took a slow breath. "We'll handle this," he said quietly, more to himself than anyone else. "We'll figure it out." And for a moment, the howling wind seemed to abate, leaving only the soft hush of the sea and the fragile hope of 4 souls caught in the middle of a storm. Night had settled in full by the time Colin found a moment to breathe. In the living room, Caleb was still unconscious on the old sofa, covered by blankets. Benjamin crouched on the floor, refusing to move more than a foot away from his brother. Amanda drifted between the hallway and the living room, as though she couldn't decide whether to hide or offer some silent help. The walls were lined with faded picture frames, photos of Colin's wife smiling by the beach, Amanda as a toddler with tangled hair, a long-ago happiness. The entire house felt like it carried ghosts, weighed down by the emptiness that had lingered since tragedy struck. "Let's see if we can get a little more heat in here," Colin muttered, fiddling with an old space heater in the corner. He jiggled the switch until a weak hum began. Warm air sputtered out, chasing away the worst of the cold. Benjamin cast him a glance. "Thank you for letting us stay," he said again, voice thick with exhaustion. Colin managed a gentle smile. "Of course. Let me take a look at your brother's bruises again. Maybe I can clean them up." Kneeling beside the sofa, he gently lifted the edge of the blanket to examine Caleb's arm. There were fresh scrapes, likely from a fall. A nasty bruise splotched across his forearm. The boy's eyelids fluttered, but he didn't fully wake. Amanda hovered near the sofa, arms crossed. She peered at Caleb, then looked at Benjamin as if comparing them. Something in her expression flickered pity, empathy, or maybe an echo of her own loss. It was hard to tell. "Could you grab the first aid kit, Amanda?" Colin asked softly, pointing toward the small cabinet in the kitchen. She blinked, turned on her heel, and patted away. Benjamin shifted on his knees, gaze never leaving Caleb's face. I don't know what else to do. He just collapsed. We walked for hours, and then he couldn't keep going. I tried to carry him, but I'm not strong enough." His voice trembled. Colin noticed Benjamin's hands were dirty, fingernails caked with sand and bits of dried mud. "You did your best, kid. Caleb's safe now. We'll handle it." Amanda returned with a battered plastic first aid kit. She offered it to Colin, her eyes meeting his for a split second before darting away. He tried not to show the wave of gratitude he felt. Any small interaction from her felt like a gift. "Thanks, sweetheart," he murmured. Carefully, he dabbed antiseptic on the worst scrapes. Caleb's face creased slightly in pain, but he didn't wake. Benjamin watched, worry etched across his features. Amanda stood back, but her posture had softened a fraction. She eyed the boy's bruises with a troubled look, and Colin wondered if it reminded her of her own emotional wounds unseen, but just as real. When he finished, Colin closed the kit. "Hey, Benjamin, you haven't eaten much. Let me get you another bowl of soup. Or do you like sandwiches? Benjamin shook his head. I'm okay. Just, if you have water, that's enough for now. Colin frowned but didn't push. He rose to his feet and stepped into the kitchen, rummaging for a clean glass. The house was quiet, except for the rhythmic whoosh of the space heater. He could sense Amanda's presence behind him, small and still. As he handed Benjamin the glass of water, a shaky voice drifted from the sofa. Ben? All three of them froze. Caleb's eyes fluttered open, unfocused. He coughed, chest rattling, and tried to sit up, wincing. Hey, hey, Colin said gently, easing the boy back down. Take it easy. Benjamin practically jumped forward, tears gleaming. Caleb, I'm here, it's okay. Caleb blinked, confusion in his gaze. Where? Colin caught Amanda lingering out of the corner of his eye, fists clenched like she wasn't sure if she should run or help. You're at my place, Colin explained softly. We found you near the road. You fainted. You're safe now. Caleb tried to process that, glancing at Benjamin, then scanning the unfamiliar room. Where's Mom? He whispered. Benjamin's jaw tightened. He cleared his throat, not answering. Colin felt the unspoken tension bristle in the air. Amanda stepped forward almost unconsciously, as though drawn by the boy's vulnerability. She didn't say anything, just moved closer until she stood behind Colin's shoulder, peering at Caleb with quiet empathy. Caleb reached for Benjamin's hand. I'm so cold, he breathed. Colin tucked the blanket around him more securely. We'll warm you up. You just rest. Maybe you can have some soup if you feel like it. The boy nodded weakly. His gaze slid to Amanda, who looked startled to be noticed. Who's she? He asked, voice barely above a whisper. Benjamin answered for her. That's Amanda. She lives here with him. He pointed at Colin. Amanda stiffened, eyes darting away. But she stayed put, not fleeing the room. Colin felt a flicker of hope. Go slow, Colin said, helping Caleb adjust a pillow under his head. We can talk more when you feel better. At that, Caleb's eyelids drooped. His exhaustion was palpable. Benjamin exhaled, relief mixed with heartbreak. Suddenly, a soft knock at the front door made them all jump. The sound echoed in the hush of the living room. Amanda's eyes went wide, and Colin's stomach did a flip. He glanced at the clock, nearly 10 p.m. Wait here, he told them, moving cautiously toward the front entrance. He cracked open the door, heart thumping. An older man from next door, Mr. Remy, stood in the faint porch light, a crocheted blanket draped around his shoulders. His weathered face held concern. Colin? Saw your SUV come in fast. Everything all right? Remy's voice carried the gravelly warmth of a local fisherman. Colin resisted the urge to sigh in relief. Yeah, just had a little emergency. Got a couple kids here who were in trouble. Remy peered over Colin's shoulder, curiosity etched in his lined face. They okay? Colin nodded. They will be. I'm handling it. The older man shifted on his feet. Storm's rolling in. I thought I heard shouting or something. Let me know if you need any extra blankets or a generator. Lines might go down. Thanks, Colin said, smiling politely. I'll be fine. With a quick nod, Remy disappeared into the night. Colin shut the door, locking it. When he turned back, Benjamin's expression was guarded, like a stray cat expecting to be chased off. Caleb had drifted into a doze, and Amanda was hugging her arms again near the window. It's just my neighbor, Colin assured them. He's harmless, just wanted to check. Benjamin relaxed a tiny bit. We don't want to get you in trouble. You're not, Colin said firmly. Trust me, we're good. Silence settled once more, accompanied by the whistle of the wind against the eaves. Colin noticed Amanda edging along the wall until she was near the old TV stand, as though seeking a vantage point. Her eyes flickered with questions, but her mouth stayed closed. He remembered how shocked he'd been the day she stopped speaking. She'd been only 10 then, and the doctor had said it was psychological trauma. He tried every approach, from therapy to endless patience. Nothing seemed to crack her shell. Now, with these two boys here, something different glinted in her eyes like empathy had stirred from a long slumber. Benjamin, Colin said quietly, I'll set you guys up here in the living room for tonight. I can get some blankets. And we have a pull-out cot if it helps. We'll figure things out in the morning. Benjamin let out a breath he seemed to have been holding forever. Okay, that's good. A wave of exhaustion tugged at Colin as well, but he needed to ensure Caleb was stable. He found an extra pillow in the closet, laid it near the couch, and motioned for Benjamin to sit. Amanda hovered, her fingers twitching at her side as though she might reach out and help. Finally, she made a small move toward the hallway, glancing over her shoulder like she wanted to confirm it was all right for her to go. Colin nodded. She disappeared into the darkness. Benjamin's eyes flicked up to meet Colin's. She doesn't talk, huh? Colin pressed his lips into a thin line. Not for a while, but give her time. He pulled out a blanket for Benjamin, then offered him a faint smile. You two just rest. You're safe. Benjamin lay down near his brother, hugging the blanket to his chin. He looked so young, his face smudged with worry and fatigue. Colin lingered for a moment, heart heavy and full all at once. He pictured his wife's face, hearing her voice in his head. Don't stop caring. Maybe this was exactly what he needed someone else to care for, a reason to break the silence that had overtaken his home. Outside, the ocean thundered, but inside, the house on the slope felt a little less empty. The first thing Colin noticed when he woke was how quiet it was. No howling wind, no rattling windows, just a soft patter of rain against the roof. He peeled himself off the recliner where he dozed off. A crick shot through his neck. Sleeping upright never did him any favors. The living room was washed in a pale, grayish glow. The sky outside churned with heavy clouds, but the storm had mostly passed. On the couch, Caleb was stirring, eyes fluttering open. Benjamin dozed close by, one arm draped protectively over his brother. A quick glance around showed that Amanda was nowhere in sight. Colin figured she might be in her room, or possibly staring at the ocean through the front window, her two favorite retreats. He rose to his feet, rolling his shoulders. As he brewed some coffee in the kitchen, soft footsteps approached. Amanda stood in the doorway, wearing an oversized sweater that made her look even smaller. Her gaze flickered from the coffee pot to the living room. Good morning, Colin said quietly, uncertain if she'd respond. As usual, she didn't speak, but nodded almost imperceptibly. He poured coffee into his one decent mug. You sleep okay? Amanda's eyes slipped away, choosing not to answer. Still, she stepped aside so he could see into the living room. There, Benjamin sat up, hair sticking out in odd angles, blinking like he was still reconciling the fact they'd made it through the night. He placed a gentle hand on Caleb's shoulder, waking him. Caleb let out a tiny groan, rubbing at his bruised arm. Colin set the mug down and walked over. How are you feeling, buddy? Caleb squinted, then offered a shy shrug. Better, I guess. My arm hurts. Benjamin patted Caleb's leg. At least you're awake. You had me worried. A faint smile touched Caleb's face, but it vanished quickly. Where are we? Colin crouched near them. My place, I'm Colin. You're safe here. Caleb nodded slowly, eyes roving around the modest space. He caught sight of Amanda lingering in the kitchen doorway, gave her a tiny wave. She didn't wave back, but a flicker of warmth crossed her features. So, Colin said, rubbing his hands together. Anybody hungry? I've got cereal, maybe some oatmeal. Or we can do toast. My cooking skills are questionable, but I can manage breakfast. Benjamin and Caleb exchanged a look. Their guarded expressions suggested they weren't used to people offering them food without strings attached. Toast is fine, Benjamin said at last. Caleb nodded. Me too. Amanda slipped out of view, presumably heading to her room. Colin stifled a pang of disappointment but let her go. One step at a time, he reminded himself. He busied himself in the small kitchen, toasting bread and spreading butter with practiced efficiency. The coffee pot hissed in the background, and a sense of normalcy began to settle in. When he returned with a plate of toast, Caleb sat cross-legged on the couch, blanket still around his shoulders. Benjamin perched on the edge. Both boys mumbled their thanks, chomping at the slices like they hadn't eaten in days. Colin wanted to ask 1,000 questions. Where is your mother? Why were you out there? Who are you running from? but he remembered how easily kids could shut down if pushed too hard. Instead, he offered small talk. "It rains a lot here. Storms roll in off the ocean," he said, watching them devour the toast. "But the view is something else. When the sun does come out, the cliffs look like gold." Benjamin paused mid-bite. "Do you live here by yourself? I mean, except for her?" He jerked his chin toward the hallway, referencing Amanda. Colin cleared his throat. "Yeah, it's just me and Amanda. My wife passed away a few years back." Caleb's chewing slowed. "I'm sorry," he murmured, glancing at Benjamin. Colin forced a small smile, though the ache in his chest was immediate. "It's all right. We're managing." He hesitated, then gently prodded. "What about you two? You mentioned your mom. Is she—" Benjamin's grip on the toast tightened. He avoided Colin's gaze. "She told us to keep going if something happened," he whispered. "She said if we get separated, we have to find somewhere safe." Caleb's eyes flickered with sadness. "We did, but she never came." A heavy hush fell over the living room, broken only by the hum of the space heater. Colin swallowed, his mind racing. The boys had been on the run, mother missing, maybe even worse. After a moment, he ruffled Caleb's hair softly. "Well, for now, you're safe here. We can try to figure out how to help you." Benjamin took a shaky breath. We can't go back." "Back where?" The boy opened his mouth, then shut it. Instead of explaining, he just shook his head and mumbled, "We can't." Colin sensed the tension, recognized it as fear. "All right, you don't have to tell me everything right now. Let's just focus on getting you warm and healthy." As if on cue, a soft rustling came from the hallway. Amanda emerged with 2 pillows in her arms, as though she wasn't sure what else to do. She set them down near the couch. Both boys paused, looking at her. Amanda stared back, biting her lower lip. Colin half expected her to bolt again, but she remained. Amanda's not big on talking," Colin explained awkwardly. "But she's good at, drawing or helping with little stuff." Caleb offered a timid smile. "Thank you," he said, addressing Amanda. She lowered her gaze, stepping away to the side of the couch. Benjamin studied her, brows furrowed. "She really doesn't talk at all?" Amanda's shoulders tensed, but she didn't flee. Colin answered for her. "It's been a while. There was an accident in the family." He cleared his throat, shifting the subject. "So, do you guys need anything else?" "Maybe just water?" Caleb asked quietly. "Sure." Colin disappeared into the kitchen, filling a glass from the tap. He tried to gather his thoughts. These boys had shown up on a cliffside, battered and scared, referencing some wealthy, dangerous family they had fled. It all felt surreal, yet heartbreakingly real at the same time. Returning, he handed the water to Caleb, who sipped gratefully. The younger boy's cheeks were regaining color, a good sign that last night's chill hadn't done permanent damage. Benjamin swallowed the last bite of toast. "You really don't mind if we stay for a while?" Colin gave a gentle shrug. "You stay as long as you need, but if someone's after you, I'd like to know. I mean, to keep you safe." Benjamin pressed his lips together, glancing at Caleb, who looked equally uncertain. "There's a man, he's powerful. Our mom said he's part of a big family with money and connections. She found out something she wasn't supposed to, I guess, and we had to run." It wasn't much detail, but enough to confirm Colin's fears that this was bigger than just 2 kids wandering lost. He exhaled, pressing a hand to the back of his neck. "We'll figure it out," he repeated, trying to reassure them, maybe trying to reassure himself too. Amanda stepped forward, her eyes locked on Caleb. For a moment it looked like she might open her mouth. Instead, she carefully placed another folded blanket near him, then retreated. Benjamin offered a quiet, "Thanks." Caleb's eyes drifted around the room, noticing the family photos. "Is that you?" he asked, pointing to a frame showing Colin and a smiling woman holding a toddler. Colin nodded, throat tightening. "Yeah, that's me, my wife, and Amanda." Caleb said nothing, but the sympathy in his gaze felt genuine. Another wave of hushed quiet spread through the house, like the sea itself was holding its breath. Outside, rain tapped lightly on the windows, a soft lullaby in the gray morning. Listen, Colin said, clearing his throat. If you feel up to it, maybe later we can see about more clothes for you. I'm not sure I have anything that'll fit perfectly, but I'll find something. Benjamin nodded. Yeah, sure. Caleb just sunk deeper into the couch, fatigue still present in his eyes. Amanda lingered near the side table, fiddling with the corner of a dusty lampshade. Her presence, though silent, felt like an olive branch she hadn't run off, and she wasn't ignoring them. Something about seeing these two boys might have sparked her empathy, or at least her curiosity. Colin headed to the window and peered outside. The rolling clouds parted just a bit, revealing the crest of a wave smashing into the distant rocks. The watery sunlight made the wet cliffs gleam, a stark reminder of how close they'd all come to tragedy on that twisting road. He glanced back at the three kids. Yes, he thought, he'd done the right thing by stopping. He didn't have a plan for what came next, but he could at least give them shelter for now. Okay, he said softly, turning toward them. Let's take one step at a time. And for the first time in what felt like ages, he realized he wasn't speaking only to them, he was speaking to himself as well, letting hope creep in like the faint morning light filtering through the clouds. Early days by the ocean morning light crept through the thin curtains of Colin's living room, hinting at a clear sky outside. The storm that had rocked the coast 2 nights before seemed to have left a calmer sea in its wake. Seagulls cried overhead, their distant calls mingling with the quiet rustle of the wind. Colin stood at the kitchen counter, stirring pancake batter in a chipped ceramic bowl. He glanced at the hallway where Amanda's door stayed half shut. Normally, she preferred to stay in her room until breakfast was nearly over, but today he was hopeful. After all, Benjamin and Caleb had spent their first real night in the cottage without any major incidents, except for the faint noise of Caleb coughing in the early hours. He poured a small circle of batter onto the hot skillet. Keep it simple, he reminded himself. They had limited groceries, so pancakes seemed a decent treat for the kids. Footsteps padded into the living area. Benjamin peeked around the corner, hair still ruffled with sleep. It smells good, he said shyly. Colin tried a reassuring smile. Morning, buddy. Figured you guys might like something sweet to start the day. Benjamin nodded, stepping further in. He wore one of Colin's old shirts that practically swallowed him. Caleb's still asleep, he explained softly, but I think he's feeling better. He walked around a bit last night. That's good news, Colin answered, flipping the pancake. You want to help me set the table? Benjamin looked momentarily startled. Maybe he wasn't used to being asked for help. Still, he nodded. Sure. He pulled open a rickety drawer, rummaging for forks and spoons. Soon the tiny dining table, nothing more than a second-hand round top with mismatched chairs, had 3 settings. Benjamin hesitated, then added a 4th. Even if Amanda rarely ate with them, it felt right to set her a place. A moment later, Amanda emerged from the hallway. She wore a gray hoodie and sweatpants, her hair loosely braided. Though her gaze stayed downward, she hovered near the table, noticing Benjamin's effort. She didn't speak, but there was an almost imperceptible nod of acknowledgement. Colin stacked fresh pancakes on a plate and placed them at the center. Morning, Amanda, he said quietly, trying not to load his voice with pressure. Her eyes flicked to him, then to Benjamin. Benjamin offered a small smile. Hey, Amanda, we saved you a seat. She blinked, then let out a tiny breath as she sat. The 3 of them formed an odd circle around the table, no one quite sure how to begin. Outside, a gentle breeze rattled the glass in the windows. Finally, Colin broke the silence. Dig in. We've got some honey or peanut butter, whichever you like. Benjamin reached for a pancake and carefully slathered a bit of honey. Amanda watched him, then tentatively copied his actions, though she used far less. Colin tried to contain the relief coursing through him. This was progress, no matter how small. After a few bites, Benjamin glanced at Amanda. Where's Caleb? Still sleeping? She shrugged, then glanced at Colin as if passing the question on to him. Probably, Colin said. I'll check on him once I finish eating. Let him rest a bit. He paused, noticing a flicker of concern on Benjamin's face. He'll be okay, Colin added. He's stronger than he looks. Benjamin's expression warmed. He's usually pretty active. Before everything, he loved running around outside. He hesitated, eyes dropping to the table. Colin nodded gently, but didn't push. The hush that fell over them was broken by the sound of gulls circling outside and the distant roll of waves. He wanted to ask about their mother, about how they ended up on that cliff road, but he could sense Benjamin's caution. Prying too soon might drive them away emotionally, and that was the last thing he wanted. Amanda ate slowly, each bite measured. She didn't make eye contact, but she didn't flee either. That alone felt like a quiet victory. Just a week ago, she hardly entered the living area if someone else was there. Once breakfast wrapped up, Benjamin stood. "I'll go wake Caleb. Don't want him missing these." He gestured to the remaining pancakes with a small grin. "Good idea," Colin said. "I'll clean up here." Benjamin slipped down the short hallway, footsteps hushed on the worn floorboards. Amanda watched him go, then gently picked up some dishes and carried them to the sink, assisting Colin in silence. After stacking the plates, she took a step back and folded her arms, as though unsure what else to do. Colin gave her a grateful nod. "Thanks for helping." She offered a fleeting glance of acknowledgement, then retreated to the living room couch, where she busied herself flipping through a well-worn art magazine. The hush of morning settled in again. Mid-morning chores. An hour later, Caleb emerged, leaning on Benjamin's shoulder for support. His face looked better still, a bit pale, but the bruises around his arm were less angry-looking. He gave a half-smile when he saw Colin fiddling with a broken window latch near the front door. "Hey," Caleb said quietly, voice raspy from sleep. "Sorry I slept so long." Colin turned, pushing away the toolbox. "No need to apologize, kid. Feeling okay?" Caleb nodded. "Yeah, tired, but better." He spotted Amanda perched on the couch. "Hi," he ventured softly. Amanda paused her page-turning, managing a little wave in return. A flicker of surprise crossed Caleb's face, like he didn't expect her to respond at all. Benjamin guided him to a chair. "You should eat something. We saved pancakes." He glanced at Colin. "If that's still okay?" "Of course," Colin said. "I can heat them up. Just a sec." He headed to the kitchen corner, quickly warming the leftover pancakes on a small skillet. The sizzling smell drifted through the room, an oddly comforting sign of normalcy. When he returned, Caleb accepted the plate with both hands. "Thanks," he murmured. Benjamin hovered near him, protective as ever. Meanwhile, Amanda remained on the couch, trying to seem absorbed in her magazine, but her eyes kept darting to the younger boy. Caleb took a bite, chewing slowly. "It's good," he said, a faint blush creeping into his cheeks, maybe from embarrassment at being fussed over, or simple gratitude. A comfortable quiet settled, broken only by the distant lap of waves against the rocky shore. Through the window, sunlight gleamed on the ocean's surface, turning the water a silvery blue. The wind had died down, leaving only a mild breeze that carried the scent of salt and seaweed. An unseen clue. Later that day, after chores and a brief walk outside to breathe the fresh coastal air, Caleb felt strong enough to roam the house with Benjamin at his side. They ended up exploring the small bedrooms, the hallway closet, and even the cluttered storage area near the back door. Colin was busy fixing a leaky faucet in the bathroom. Amanda quietly observed the two brothers from a distance, occasionally hovering in a doorway. She never spoke, but her curiosity was plain. While rummaging through the pocket of his thin jacket, Caleb found a folded scrap of paper. He froze, blinking at it. "Ben," he whispered, "I forgot we had this." Benjamin joined him. "What is it?" Caleb smoothed it out, revealing a handwritten note with the name Daniel Attorney at Law and a phone number scrawled beneath. The corner of the paper was stained and wrinkled, as if it had been through rain or worse. "You remember?" Benjamin asked, voice taut with significance. Caleb nodded. "Mom said if anything happened, we should find him. She said he was the only one who could help us legally." The tension in Benjamin's posture was immediate. "But I wasn't sure we'd get the chance." From the threshold, Amanda watched silently, her expression pensive. She could sense the weight of that note. even if she didn't know the details. Benjamin exhaled slowly. Should we show Colin? Caleb hesitated. I guess we should, right? Amanda, as though guided by an invisible prompt, stepped forward. She reached out a careful hand. Benjamin and Caleb exchanged looks, then allowed her to see the note. Her eyes scanned the words. Daniel, attorney at law. She glanced at the phone number, then back to them. Do you think he'll know about your mom? Amanda didn't say it, her expression said it for her. Benjamin read the question in her gaze. Maybe, he whispered. We don't know what else to do. Evening reflections. That night, after a simple meal of canned soup and some leftover bread, Benjamin handed the note to Colin. The four of them sat around the living room, the overhead light casting a warm glow on the worn furniture. Outside, a gentle nighttime breeze rustled the coastal brush. Colin read it, heart pounding. Daniel, attorney at law, he said under his breath. You think he's your mother's friend? Benjamin nodded. She mentioned him, said he was helping her with stuff. He swallowed, glancing at Caleb. Then she disappeared. We kept the paper in case we got in real trouble. Colin's thoughts spun. If this Daniel was a lawyer who once worked with their mother, maybe he had answers. Or maybe it was a dead end. But ignoring it felt wrong. He forced a calm tone. I can call him, if it's okay with you two. Caleb glanced at Benjamin for reassurance. The older boy gave a slight nod. Yes, please, just be careful. Amanda, seated cross-legged on the couch, stared at the note's scribbled phone number as if it were a portal to some unknown fate. All right, Colin agreed. We'll give him a call tomorrow. It's late now, but first thing in the morning, I'll do it. A hush fell, weighted by a swirl of hope and fear. The dusty lampshade flickered with a slight draft, reminding them that the house perched on a cliff could feel both cozy and precarious. Thanks, Benjamin finally whispered. Caleb echoed a quiet, yeah, fiddling with the hem of his shirt. Amanda's gaze drifted to Colin. In her silence, he sensed a flicker of trust. Maybe for the first time in a long while, she was seeing him step up, not just as a dad, but as a protector, someone willing to stand in the breach for those who needed it most. He forced a gentle smile. We'll figure this out, he said, echoing the vow he'd been making to himself since the night he found these children, no matter what. A faint hush of wind pushed against the window, like the ocean itself was listening. In the stillness, the four souls huddled under the roof of the small cottage, bound by uncertainty yet buoyed by a thread of faith in one another. Echoes of the sea and nightmares. Darkness wrapped the cottage like a charcoal blanket. Outside, the moon hovered behind a thin veil of clouds, sending watery beams across the choppy sea. Waves crashed in rhythmic intervals, a heartbeat of the coast. In the cramped confines of the living room, Benjamin pulled a blanket up to Caleb's chin. They dragged a couple of floor cushions to create makeshift beds. Across the room, Amanda curled up on the sofa. She sometimes dozed off there if she felt uneasy in her own space. Colin had retreated to his bedroom, exhausted from the day's repairs and worries. They were all in limbo. Tomorrow would bring the phone call to Daniel, and possibly upend whatever fragile peace they'd built. Nighttime fear. Sometime around midnight, Caleb began to toss and turn. Benjamin woke to his brother's strained whimpers, saw his forehead pinched in anxiety. Moonlight spilled in through the window, illuminating the boy's pale features. "Mama!" Caleb gasped, chest heaving. Don't leave!" Benjamin scrambled upright, heart pounding. "Caleb, it's okay! I'm here!" he whispered, pressing a hand to Caleb's damp hair. "Shh, you're safe now." Caleb's eyes snapped open, shining with tears. He blinked wildly, disoriented. "Ben?" "Yeah, it's me." Benjamin's voice broke at the sight of his brother's panic. "Just a bad dream." A shadow shifted in the corner. Amanda stood there, wide-eyed. She must have heard the commotion. Her hoodie was bunched in her hands, her posture tense. She took a hesitant step closer, biting her lower lip as if unsure how to help. Caleb clung to Benjamin's arm. "I dreamed she was calling out to us. We were running, but we couldn't find her." His breath hitched. "And that man, Dennis, he was right behind us, so close." His voice choked. Benjamin swallowed the knot in his own throat, glancing helplessly at Amanda. She stared back, eyes flickering with empathy. Carefully, she reached out to place a blanket over Caleb's trembling shoulders. Caleb exhaled, shoulders sagging. "Thanks," he mumbled, though tears still clung to his lashes. In the dim moonlight, he looked heartbreakingly young. Amanda remained close, though she said nothing. Benjamin gently wiped his brother's cheeks with the edge of the blanket, wishing he had the magic words to banish Caleb's nightmares. Colin's concerned footsteps approached from the hallway. Colin appeared, hair disheveled, worry etched on his face. "Hey, everything okay?" he asked, voice husky with sleep. Benjamin shook his head. "He had a nightmare about our mom, about Dennis chasing us." Colin's jaw tightened at the mention of Dennis, though he tried to keep calm. He knelt beside them, placing a hand on Caleb's shoulder. "You're safe here," he repeated, the same promise he'd given them before. "It's just a dream." Caleb sniffed, nodding but not looking entirely convinced. Amanda hovered close, glancing between Colin and the boys. The swirl of unspoken tension seemed to wrap them all in a heavy cloak. "Do you want to talk about it?" Colin ventured softly. Caleb hesitated, watery eyes staring at the worn carpet. "Mom found out something about Dennis stealing money or bribing people. She told us we had to leave. She said if we stayed, we'd be in danger." His throat bobbed as he swallowed. "We didn't even get to say goodbye to her properly. One morning, she just didn't come back to our motel room." The admission hung in the air. Benjamin's gaze flicked to the floor. "She was sick too," he whispered. "But she never let us see her really bad days. She just kept saying we had to keep moving. Then we got separated." Colin felt a wave of sympathy, mixed with a slow burn of anger at whoever had forced a mother and 2 kids into such desperation. Amanda, though silent, stepped an inch closer, as if drawn by their grief. "What about your father?" Colin asked gently, not wanting to pry too deep but feeling the question needed asking. Benjamin's face tightened. "Never knew him. Mom said it was complicated." A hush followed. Colin noticed Amanda's eyes glistening as though she recognized a parallel. She'd lost her mother too, albeit in a different way. The rawness of these children's experiences tugged at something deep in him. "Look," Colin said, clearing his throat. "I'm not sure what's going on with Dennis and your mom's discovery, but I promise we'll figure out how to protect you. Daniel might know more about it." Caleb exhaled shakily. "Thanks," he whispered, "and I'm sorry for waking everyone." Amanda shook her head in a small, empathetic gesture. She reached out, tentatively patting Caleb's hand, then withdrew as though startled by her own boldness. The boy's lips quirked in a faint smile of gratitude. Even Benjamin looked momentarily relieved, like they weren't facing this alone anymore. Colin ruffled Caleb's hair. "Try to get some rest, both of you. Tomorrow morning we'll call Daniel. Let's see what he can tell us." Benjamin and Caleb nodded. Amanda retreated to the couch, curling her legs beneath her, still watchful. Colin lingered for another minute, ensuring Caleb's breathing calmed down. Then he squeezed both their shoulders gently and returned to his room. The quiet that settled wasn't exactly peaceful, but it was a reminder that they were all under one roof, sharing the same anxieties, forging an unlikely bond through whispered promises in the dark. Calling the lawyer morning brought a brittle sunrise, the sky streaked with pale pink and orange. The ocean glittered under the early rays, a deceptive calm belying the tension inside Colin's cottage. After a quick breakfast, just toast and canned fruit, Colin pulled out the note with Daniel's phone number. He breathed in, trying to steady the nerves fluttering in his chest. Benjamin and Caleb hovered near the kitchen table, exchanging anxious glances. Amanda sat on a stool by the window, arms crossed as she gazed at the horizon. It felt like a collective holding of breath. "All right," Colin said, pressing the phone to his ear. The dial tone buzzed, then a click. A male voice answered, measured and alert. "Daniel Fletcher speaking." Colin cleared his throat. Hi. My name's Colin. I think you knew a woman named Linda, mother of Benjamin and Caleb?" He realized his voice was shaking. He forced a breath and continued, "She gave them your name and number." Daniel's tone shifted, laced with concern. "She did?" Are the boys all right? Colin glanced at them, Benjamin tensed, Caleb fiddling with his sleeve. They're safe for now. But they've been through a lot. Their mom disappeared. They mentioned a man named Dennis, said you might know something. A pause on the line. Then Daniel exhaled. I see. Where are you located? Colin hesitated, unsure if revealing their location was wise. Benjamin caught his eye and gave a little nod, as if to say they trusted this lawyer. A small coastal town up north, Colin answered vaguely. Look, I'm just trying to figure out how to protect them. They're scared Dennis might come after them. Daniel's voice steadied. Linda hired me for a potential lawsuit against some shady dealings linked to the Dennis family. She vanished before we could file anything officially. I've been worried had no way to contact her or the kids. Listen, can we meet in person? I want to help. Colin's pulse thudded. Yeah, sure, that'd be good. These kids deserve answers. But is it safe? A gentle sigh from Daniel's end. I'll be cautious. If you text me an address, I can drive up tomorrow. I have all their case files, whatever Linda gave me. Maybe we can piece this together. Tomorrow works, Colin said. His gaze flicked to the children, all three watching him. Thanks, Daniel. They hung up. Colin exhaled, setting the phone down. He's coming tomorrow, he announced. Said he'd bring some info on everything. Benjamin's shoulders sagged in relief. Caleb let out a small breath. Amanda tapped her fingers against her armrest, eyes thoughtful, reassurance over dinner. That evening, the four of them gathered for an impromptu dinner. Colin grilled a few small fish he'd picked up at the dock, the house filled with the savory aroma of sizzling fish and herbs. Outside, pink dusk draped the rocky cliffs. Amanda surprised them by ladling water into cups at the table, an unspoken help that said more than words. Caleb gave her a tentative grin, which she half returned. Sitting around the table, Colin, Amanda, Benjamin, and Caleb, they formed a makeshift family scene. The tension about Daniel's impending visit weighed on them, but so did a sense of hope. Between bites, Benjamin cleared his throat. So how, do you know we can trust Daniel? Colin dabbed at a fishbone. I don't. Not fully. But from what you said, your mom felt he was trustworthy enough to represent her. He paused. Sometimes you gotta take a leap of faith, or else stay stuck in fear. I can't let you guys stay stuck, not if I can help it. Caleb fiddled with his fork, eyes downcast. I miss her, he whispered. I wish we had a sign she was still out there. No one spoke for a beat. Amanda's gaze flicked around the table, and then she took a tiny pencil from her hoodie pocket, scribbling something on a small notepad she'd found in the kitchen. She slid it across to Caleb. He read it, lips parting in surprise. Then, with a hint of a smile, he shared it with Benjamin. The scribble said, "She loved you, still does." Caleb swallowed hard, nodding. Benjamin's eyes grew moist. Thank you, he said quietly, addressing Amanda. She ducked her head, cheeks flushing. It was a moment that felt tender, even though only a few words were written, not spoken. When dinner wound down, the sun had slipped below the horizon, leaving a soft glow in the sky. The hush in the cottage wasn't empty. It thrummed with the unspoken alliance forming between them. Colin stood to collect plates. Let's get some rest tonight. Daniel should be here tomorrow afternoon. We'll see what we can learn. Benjamin and Caleb agreed, pushing their chairs back. Amanda lingered at the table, her hand resting on the notepad. Colin caught her eye and gave a small nod of pride. It felt like Amanda was bridging a gap, stepping out of her silent fortress, if only by inches. She rose and padded toward her room. In the dimly lit hallway, she paused, turning just enough to glance at Colin. In her eyes, he saw something like gratitude. Then she disappeared into the darkness. Daniel arrives on the cliff. Midday sunlight shimmered across the ocean's surface, bright enough to hurt the eyes. A crisp breeze whispered through the wild grasses that lined the gravel driveway leading to Colin's cottage. He stood outside, arms crossed, scanning the horizon for any sign of an approaching vehicle. Benjamin and Caleb waited on the porch steps, restless. Amanda perched on a low wooden railing, near enough to observe but far enough to keep her usual cautious distance. Despite the warmth of the sun, tension coiled in the air like a tightly wound spring. Finally, a blue sedan materialized at the bend in the road. It rumbled up the gravel path, stirring up dust. Colin stiffened, glancing at Benjamin. The boy swallowed, nodding. They were ready well, as ready as they could be. The car parked, and out stepped a man in his early 30s, perhaps. He wore a windbreaker over a neatly pressed shirt and a pair of practical boots that suggested he'd taken the coastal terrain seriously. His dark hair was cropped close, and he carried a worn leather briefcase. "You must be Colin," the man said, offering a handshake. His tone was kind, his gaze alert. "I'm Daniel Fletcher." Colin shook his hand. "That's me. Thanks for coming all this way." Daniel's gaze flicked to Benjamin and Caleb, standing side by side. Their eyes were equal parts hope and trepidation. "Hey, guys," he greeted gently. "It's good to see you alive and safe." Benjamin managed a faint smile. Caleb ducked his head. Amanda, half hidden behind them, studied Daniel warily. Inside the cottage, they led Daniel indoors. The moment the door shut, he exhaled. "This place is peaceful, in its own way," he remarked, glancing at the old sofa, the battered armchair, the wide windows revealing a turquoise stretch of ocean. Colin offered him a seat. "Peaceful, but we've had our share of nerves lately." Daniel nodded, setting his briefcase on the coffee table. He snapped it open, revealing a stack of folders and papers. Amanda hovered by the doorway, while Benjamin and Caleb perched close on the sofa. "Linda hired me about 4 months ago," Daniel began, voice low. "She discovered that Dennis's family was siphoning money from charitable funds and laundering it through dummy corporations. She wanted to blow the whistle." Benjamin stared, swallowing hard. "She told us bits and pieces," he said quietly. "But not all that." Daniel's expression darkened. "Yeah, it was big enough to get her threatened, I suspect. She was determined to keep you two safe. Then she vanished." He spread out a few documents. "I tried to find you, couldn't. Until now." Caleb shifted, leaning into Benjamin for comfort. "She was sick," Caleb whispered. "We don't know if that's what happened to her or if Dennis." His voice caught. Daniel's gaze softened. "I don't have answers about her disappearance, but I do know Dennis. He wields influence in legal circles, which is why Linda needed me someone outside their usual web. If they're aware you boys are here, they might try to claim custody or hush you up." A flicker of anger sparked in Colin's chest. "They can't just walk in and take them. I won't let them." Daniel raised a brow, impressed. "That's good, because if they file a claim in court, we'll need evidence of your care for the kids, plus proof that Dennis is unfit." "The kid's mother's testimony would have helped, but—" He trailed off, letting the grim reality hang in the air. Benjamin sucked in a breath. "But Mom's gone," he said, voice trembling. "So what do we do?" Daniel tapped a folder. "We build a case. We show that Linda entrusted you to me and now to Colin for their well-being. We highlight any risk factors from Dennis's side. If we can prove the kids are safer here, we can block any custody attempt." Colin nodded firmly. "I'll do whatever it takes." He glanced at Amanda, who hovered in the corner. She met his gaze, a flicker of solidarity lighting her eyes. A storm on the horizon. They spent the next hour sifting through Linda's old notes, receipts, and partial legal forms. Daniel explained how they could formalize Colin's guardianship if it came to that. Amanda hovered close, listening intently, though her lips stayed sealed. As the discussion wrapped up, Daniel closed the briefcase. "I'll stay in town tonight, if that's okay," he said. "We can talk more tomorrow. This might get complicated fast. Dennis has eyes everywhere." Benjamin clenched his fists, fear skittering over his features. "We just want to be normal." Caleb's eyes dropped to the floor. "Tired of running." Daniel's tone gentled. "I know. Let me help." Colin escorted him to the door, wind ruffling their hair. "Is there anything else we should do?" he asked in a low voice. "Keep a low profile. Don't let the boys wander off alone. And if anything suspicious happens, call me." Daniel's gaze cut to the horizon. "This place is remote, which is good and bad. Just be on alert." Colin nodded, a stony resolve taking hold. "I will. Thanks." Daniel headed to his car, giving the kids a final nod of encouragement. As he drove away, Dust curling behind the sedan, Colin felt the precarious balance of their lives sharpen. They had a potential ally, but also a looming confrontation with a powerful enemy. Amanda appeared at his side, hands clasped tight. She studied his face, then offered a small nudge with her elbow, a silent show of support. "Don't worry," Colin murmured, though his heart hammered. "We'll handle this." In the yard, Benjamin and Caleb stood side by side, the ocean breeze lifting their hair. They watched Daniel's car vanish around the bend. None of them spoke, but the unspoken vow was clear. They would face whatever came next together. Signs of intrusion. Colin woke to a dull gray sky and a thick layer of mist rolling inland from the sea. The coastal air smelled wet and briny, clinging to every surface of his small cottage. He rubbed the sleep from his eyes, pulling on a flannel shirt over his shirt. Outside, gulls wheeled overhead, their cries echoing across the yard. He headed to the front door to breathe in the morning. But the moment he stepped onto the porch, something caught his attention: fresh tire tracks etched into the gravel path beyond the house's driveway. They weren't from Daniel's sedan, which had left yesterday afternoon, nor from any local fisherman's truck. These were narrower, as if someone with a smaller car had come close, then turned around. Unease snaked through him. Nobody else ever ventured this far on the property, especially not at dawn. He walked down the porch steps to examine the tracks. The mist swirled around his ankles and droplets clung to his boots. He noticed partial footprints, like someone had stepped out, circled behind a shrub, then retreated. As he stood there, scanning the trees and brush, a chill skated down his spine. The hush of morning seemed heavier, as if the ocean itself was watching. Dennis, the name, rose in his mind. Had one of his people come snooping? A noise on the porch made him turn. Amanda stood there, hugging her arms. Her dark hair framed her wary expression, and she looked between Colin and the tire marks. "It's nothing, maybe," he said softly, though his voice wavered. "Could be someone turning around. But keep your eyes open, okay?" She gave a tiny nod, stepping back inside. Her silence spoke volumes. Alarm and advice. Colin found Daniel reading through legal papers at the worn kitchen table. Benjamin and Caleb lingered in the living area, munching on toast. The air felt damp, the smell of strong coffee drifting around them. "Daniel," Colin said, dropping his voice, "I think we had an uninvited visitor this morning. Tire tracks, footprints." Daniel's face sharpened with concern. "You certain?" Colin nodded. "No one else has reason to be out here. The tracks looked fresh." Benjamin overheard, setting down his toast. "You think it's them?" he whispered, eyes flicking to Caleb. "It might be," Daniel replied, sliding a look at Colin. "We can't ignore the possibility. Dennis wants to gather intel, maybe catch us off guard." Caleb's shoulders tensed, old fears creeping back. "Then what do we do?" Daniel tapped his pen against a pile of documents. "We stay cautious. Keep the doors locked, especially at night. I'll file a notice that you're seeking temporary guardianship. That way, if Dennis tries anything underhanded, we can push back legally." Amanda edged closer, hands twined. She looked at Colin, her gaze asking, "Is this safe?" "We'll be okay," Colin said, voice firm, though anxiety flickered in his chest. "Daniel knows what he's doing. We just have to be ready." Amanda nodded once, glancing at Benjamin and Caleb as if to silently reassure them. Even without words, the message was clear. We stand together. Steadfast by the hearth. By late afternoon, the fog had lifted, replaced by a brisk coastal wind that rattled the cottage's windows. Colin spent hours double-checking the old locks, propping a wooden beam against the back door. Daniel made phone calls to legal contacts, ensuring their paperwork was in order. Benjamin and Caleb tried to distract themselves by playing a game with seashells on the porch, but occasional glances at the driveway betrayed their nerves. As evening approached, Colin decided a comforting meal might help. He'd picked up a small haul of clams and a couple of crabs from a fisherman friend at the dock. Now the kitchen filled with the savory aroma of seafood simmering in a pot. Steam beaded on the windows, fogging up the glass. Daniel lingered at the table, reviewing a stack of documents. Amanda, quietly curious, stood near him, occasionally pointing at a line or scribbling a note on a pad. Though she barely spoke, her presence radiated a calm interest, and Daniel responded politely, explaining legal jargon in simpler terms. Benjamin and Caleb were drawn by the smell of dinner, their anxious energy shifting to cautious excitement. The makeshift family gathered around the small dining table as Colin brought out the steaming pot of seafood stew. Amanda fetched bowls and utensils, setting them carefully at each place. "Thanks for letting me stay another night," Daniel said, folding away his papers. "I'll head back to the motel in town tomorrow morning, but for now, this is a welcome break from reading about property law." "No worries," Colin replied. "We appreciate your help more than you know." They all dug into the stew, the warm broth washing away some of the day's tension. The saltiness of the clams, the gentle sweetness of crab meat, and the faint tang of coastal herbs made for a hearty meal. Even Amanda seemed more at ease, offering the breadbasket to Caleb with a small smile. Benjamin cast a shy glance at Daniel. "So, do you think they'll come soon?" Daniel paused, setting down his spoon. "They'll likely try subtle intimidation first. Maybe they already have, checking out the property. But if they do show up openly, we know what to do. Ask for a court order, stand our ground. Legally, they can't just snatch you away." Caleb's grip tightened on his spoon. I don't want any more running." Colin reached over, resting a hand on Caleb's shoulder. "You won't. Not if I can help it." Amanda took a slow breath, eyes darting between them. She gave the faintest nod of agreement, a silent vow to stand with them. Nightfall and warnings. After dinner, the wind picked up. Dark clouds rolled in from the northwest, promising a storm. Flashes of distant lightning illuminated the horizon. Colin locked up the house, carefully checking each window latch. Daniel stood by the front door, peering through the glass. "Weather's turning nasty," he murmured. "Storm might be strong." Benjamin shivered. "How bad does it usually get?" "Sometimes the gusts can roar in at 40 miles an hour," Colin answered. "We've had nights where the sea nearly hammers the cliffs apart." A flash of lightning brightened the yard, revealing a swirl of rain now driving sideways. Amanda hovered by the living room couch, arms crossed tight over her hoodie, old memories of howling winds etched on her face. Daniel helped Colin pull shut the storm shutters. Outside, the wind keened like a wounded animal, and the cottage trembled under the gust. Once everything was secured, they lit a few old lanterns in case the power flickered out. By midnight, the storm lashed at the windows, rattling them like furious fists. Rain drummed on the roof, water seeping under the porch's edge. The cottage felt both claustrophobic and oddly safe, four walls holding them together amid nature's fury. They gathered in the living room, Daniel's legal files stacked on a side table. The occasional crack of thunder made Caleb jump, but Benjamin patted his back. Amanda crept close to Colin, drawn by the desire for reassurance. In the dim lantern light, their fears were laid bare, fear of the storm outside, and fear of Dennis lurking beyond the next day's horizon. Colin looked around at them, the kids who had come to rely on him, the lawyer who'd thrown in his lot to protect them. "We'll get through this," he said, voice resolute, though he felt the quake in his own heart. "No matter what." Daniel offered a faint smile of solidarity. "Tomorrow, we keep pushing forward." And so they hunkered down, tension humming in the air, the pounding rain a relentless reminder that some storms rage whether you're ready or not. The first visit morning arrived with a gray pallor, the storm having passed overnight. Puddles glistened in the yard, and sea foam streaked the nearby rocks. The wind had died down to a stiff breeze, though the threat of thunder rumbled far out to sea, a distant echo of the night's rage. Colin was pouring coffee into mismatched mugs when a knock sounded at the front door sharp, impatient. Amanda, drying dishes, froze mid-motion, color draining from her face. Benjamin and Caleb scrambled from the living area, hearts pounding. Daniel snapped a file shut, standing with tense posture. The knock came again, louder. With a steadying breath, Colin stepped to the door and cracked it open. On the stoop stood a man in a slick black raincoat, flanked by another figure both tall, both exuding arrogance. The first man, presumably a lawyer by the crisp suit peeking from beneath the coat, flashed a thin smile. "Good morning," he said, words clipped. "I'm Marshall Tate, representing the Dennis family. I believe you have 2 children here that belong to us." Colin's spine stiffened. "They don't belong to anyone. Who are you to come claiming them?" Before Tate could respond, Daniel stepped into view. "Daniel Fletcher. I'm their legal counsel." His tone was calm, yet edged with challenge. "Do you have a court order?" Tate pressed his lips together, producing a folder. "We have preliminary documents expressing the Dennis family's intent to assume guardianship. We'd like the children to come with us while the matter is settled, in more comfortable conditions." Benjamin appeared behind Daniel, trembling but resolute. "We're not going anywhere with you." The second figure, silent until now, sneered. "That's not your choice, kid." Colin's temper flared, but Daniel held up a hand, refusing to let things escalate too far. "Unless you have an official court ruling that overrides our petition, you can't forcibly remove them." A brief standoff ensued. Rain dripped from the cottage's eaves, splashing onto the men's polished shoes. Tate's expression soured. "Dennis is prepared to escalate if necessary. The kids are under his rightful claim." From inside, Amanda hovered by the hallway, her heart pounding so loudly she thought everyone must hear it. Caleb stood near her, eyes darting with fear. "That's for a judge to decide," Daniel said, voice unwavering. "Until then, we have established a safe environment for them here." "You're trespassing." The second man scoffed, stepping forward. "Look at this dump. You think these kids are safer in a rotting shack on a cliff?" Colin's jaw clenched, every instinct screaming to throw them off his porch, but he forced a modicum of calm. "Get a court order or get off my property." Tate's eyes narrowed. "You'll regret this stalling tactic." He paused, flicking a disdainful glance toward Benjamin, then at Daniel. "We'll be back with the law on our side." He pivoted, raincoat swirling, and strode back to the sleek black car. His companion followed, shooting a final glare at Colin. Gravel crunched beneath their tires as they sped away, vanishing down the coastal road. Shaken resolve. Daniel let out a slow breath, stepping back inside. Benjamin and Caleb stared at him, tension etched on their faces. Amanda, pressed against the wall, looked to Colin for reassurance. Colin locked the door, turning to them. "They tried to bluff us, but we held firm." Daniel nodded. "They're testing the waters, seeing if we just surrender the boys. Now we know they'll push harder." Benjamin's voice shook. "I'm sick of bullies." Caleb clenched his fists. "Why can't they just leave us alone?" Amanda came forward, surprising everyone, standing beside Caleb and reaching for his hand. Though she said nothing, the gesture spoke volumes. Colin placed a hand on Benjamin's shoulder, a silent vow. "It'll be all right," Daniel said quietly. "We just have to prepare. Legal channels exist for a reason. We'll gather more evidence, strengthen the guardianship claim." No one spoke for a moment, the hush broken only by the soft patter of leftover rain on the windows. They'd stared danger in the face, and it was only the beginning. Deepening bonds. With the black car gone, a strange stillness descended. The children were visibly rattled, but Daniel encouraged them to keep living as normally as possible. Any sign of panic might be twisted against them in court. So they tried to settle into an afternoon routine. Amanda and Caleb sat at the rickety dining table, quietly drawing, while Benjamin helped Colin fix a loose shutter on the back window. Outside, the storm's aftermath glistened on every surface. The sea was calmer now, with only a slight chop cresting the waves. Salt-laced air drifted through the open windows, mingling with the smell of damp earth. Unexpected comfort. While Benjamin held the shutter hinge, Colin secured screws with an old, cordless drill. "Thanks for the help," Colin murmured. "You doing okay?" Benjamin shrugged, eyes dark with lingering worry. "I guess. It just feels like they can show up any minute, you know?" Colin sighed. "Yeah, but we're not alone. Daniel's got a plan, and I'm not letting them take you or your brother anywhere." The boy managed a small smile. "Thanks, Colin." Once they finished, they slipped back inside to find Daniel in the living room, flipping through the pages of Linda's old notes. He jotted down details, occasionally chewing the tip of his pen in concentration. Amanda hovered beside him, reading over his shoulder. A faint tension in her brow hinted at her curiosity. She had a million questions but struggled to voice them. Caleb set his colored pencils aside, wincing as he stretched. "My arm still hurts a bit," he admitted. "From the bruises." Daniel glanced up. "We can have that checked again if it doesn't improve." "Maybe tomorrow," Caleb said quietly. "I feel better than before, but if it helps in court, I can show I was neglected or something back when Dennis's people found us." He swallowed. Mom did her best, but after we started running, there wasn't always time to see a doctor. A sympathetic silence followed. Colin gently patted Caleb's shoulder. "We'll handle it." Amanda speaks. The evening sky bruised into purples and oranges, the last of daylight glinting off the water. Daniel eventually excused himself to make phone calls from the porch, leaving the family inside. The glow of a single floor lamp lent the living room a warm amber cast. Amanda slipped into the kitchen and returned with a small tray of crackers and cheese. She set it on the coffee table, then hesitated, looking at Benjamin and Caleb. There was something determined in her gaze. "Are you all right?" she asked, voice hushed but clear. Benjamin froze, eyes going round. Caleb's mouth dropped open in shock. Even Colin, picking up a stray pencil from the floor, felt his heart lurch. Amanda had just spoken a full sentence for the second time in 3 years. "Yeah," Caleb stammered, as if unsure how to respond. "We're okay, I guess?" Amanda exhaled, her cheeks coloring. "I just wanted to make sure." Her voice trembled, but she forced the words out. "You look scared when those men came." Benjamin nodded slowly. "We were, but thanks." He shot Colin a look of disbelief mixed with gratitude. This moment felt monumental. Colin's chest flooded with emotion. He reached out, gently squeezing Amanda's hand. "Kiddo, that's great. Thank you for checking on them." Amanda withdrew her hand, shy but not fleeing. Her gaze flicked to the window, where the sky glowed with the last bit of twilight. A small, tentative smile tugged at her lips. Benjamin and Caleb exchanged a glance, then grinned. "We appreciate it," Benjamin said softly. "Really." Amanda pressed her lips together, nodding. She then stepped back, as though she'd reached the limit of her comfort zone. But the energy in the room was different now, charged with a new kind of hope. A ray of sun. Later that night, the clouds parted, revealing a bright moon. Colin and Daniel took a walk around the property, flashlights in hand, ensuring no one had returned. They found no new footprints or signs of tampering. Inside, Benjamin dozed on the couch, Caleb curled up against him. Amanda sat in the armchair, her eyelids heavy. The hush of the ocean lulled them, as if reminding them they'd survived another day in the face of looming threats. Daniel set aside his notes, exhaustion etching lines on his face. "They'll come back," he said quietly to Colin. "But at least we're more prepared now." Colin nodded, glancing at Amanda, who drifted off. "We are," and Amanda spoke. Twice. A subtle smile lifted Daniel's lips. "That's progress, right?" "More than I ever expected," Colin admitted, emotion tightening his throat. "I can't help thinking it's because she sees these two kids who need her in a way. She's stepping out of her shell for them." Daniel's gaze softened, flicking to the sleeping siblings. "You're all helping each other. It's what Linda wanted for them, I'm sure." Colin swallowed hard. "We'll make it. We have to." He glanced out the window. The moonlight reflected off the silent sea, each wave a shimmering ripple. For the first time in a while, the fear in his chest felt tempered by a determined warmth. The kids were forging bonds that went beyond blood. And if that was the root of real family, then maybe they had a fighting chance against any storm, even one named Dennis. The court summons. A thin veil of gray morning light filtered through Colin's windows as he stood in the kitchen, waiting for the coffee to finish brewing. Outside, seagulls wheeled in the pale sky, crying over the choppy waves. He tried to ignore the gnawing sense that another shoe was about to drop. Amanda lingered by the dining table, quietly sketching something in the corner of a notebook. Benjamin and Caleb hovered a few feet away, rummaging for cereal and bowls. Tension was everywhere, like static electricity humming in the air. The doorbell rang, All four of them froze. Daniel, seated on the worn couch scanning legal briefs, set his notes aside. "I'll get it," he offered, rising to open the door. A uniformed courier stood at the threshold, carrying a large envelope. The moment Daniel signed for it, the courier turned without a word, striding back toward a waiting car. Colin stepped forward, eyes flicking to the bold black letters on the envelope. Notice of hearing. "What is it?" Caleb asked, nerves tinging his voice. Daniel gave him a grim look. "Looks like Dennis made his move." Benjamin's hand tightened around the edge of the counter. Amanda slipped off her chair, crossing to Colin's side as if bracing for impact. Daniel broke the seal. Inside was a court summons, formal and impersonal, demanding that Colin bring Benjamin and Caleb to a custody hearing within 2 weeks. The document spelled out the claim. Dennis was alleging that the boys needed to be returned to their rightful guardian for their own welfare. Colin's jaw clenched. "They're not property," he muttered, anger sparking behind his eyes. Benjamin read the text over Daniel's shoulder and swallowed hard. "They want us to appear in front of a judge. And if we lose—" "We won't lose," Daniel said firmly, though a flicker of worry ran across his face. "But we'll need to prepare. Gather all the evidence we can to show this environment is where you belong. Show that Dennis's intentions are not in your best interest." Caleb's gaze darted between them. "So that means we have to go to court? Like on TV?" Daniel managed a half smile. "Sort of. It's not always that dramatic, but we'll be in a hearing room with a judge, yes." Amanda set her notebook aside, stepping closer to Caleb. She gently put a hand on his arm and whispered, "You'll be okay." Her voice, though soft, startled everyone. A tight hush settled. Colin exhaled slowly. "Right. We'll do what it takes. 2 weeks is short notice." Daniel nodded. "I'll outline everything we need. Medical records, the incident reports from the day you found them, any statements from people who've seen the boys thrive here. We'll document how they were threatened by Dennis's reps." Benjamin exchanged a worried glance with Caleb. "What if they drag up our past, how we ran, or how Mom left?" Colin placed a hand on Benjamin's shoulder. "Then we'll tell the truth, that your mom tried to protect you." Caleb, eyes brimming with anxiety, finally spoke up, voice trembling. "Could we lose?" A heavy silence landed, weighed down by possibilities. Daniel sighed, rubbing his temple. "If we do nothing, yes, but we won't. We'll fight this with every tool we have." Amanda shifted toward the window, her gaze trailing the distant waves. After a moment, she turned back, lips parted like she wanted to speak. No words came, but the resolve in her eyes said enough. "Then let's get started," Colin said. "We'll get the documents. We'll prove they belong here." Outside, the sky darkened again, as if the weather itself echoed their grim determination. In the hush of the cottage, the faint crash of the ocean sounded both comforting and foreboding, like a promise that no matter how brutal the storm ahead, they'd stand together. A few days later, the sky was an unsettling mix of sunbeams and threatening clouds. Colin's phone buzzed with a short, clipped message from Daniel. "Dennis is on his way." Apparently, the man had decided to appear in person, no doubt to rattle them. Sure enough, by late morning, a gleaming black sedan rolled down the gravel lane. Dust kicked up behind it. Colin stood on the porch, arms folded, heart thudding. Benjamin, Caleb, and Amanda peered from inside, tension radiating through the windows. Daniel arrived moments earlier, pacing the front yard with a legal folder clutched under his arm. The sedan door opened, revealing a tall figure in an expensive suit, Dennis himself. Another man in a crisp navy blazer followed. They strode up to the porch steps, wearing expressions of polite disdain. "You must be Colin," Dennis said, voice smooth as oil. His gaze swept over the modest cabin, a flicker of disgust twisting his lips. "So this is where my relatives have been kept." Benjamin and Caleb sidled to the threshold, wariness in every line of their posture. Daniel stepped forward, voice steady. "Mr. Dennis, I trust you've come with official business?" Dennis's eyes slid to Daniel. "I see you're still meddling, Fletcher. I had hoped to handle this privately." He then turned to Colin. "Let's be frank. I'm prepared to offer a settlement. You release the boys into my care, and I ensure they want for nothing. I can compensate you for your time and inconvenience." A flash of outrage sparked in Colin's chest. "They're not items to be sold. I don't want your money." Dennis arched a brow. "Don't be naive. You're a fisherman, yes? Or some small-time mechanic. This life is hardly suitable for children of my lineage." Benjamin glared from behind the screen door. Caleb clung to his sleeve, remembering the fear that once gripped them every time they saw Dennis's face. Daniel cleared his throat. "They've been thriving here, and we'll prove it in court." Dennis brushed an imaginary speck of dust off his lapel. "You think a backwater judge won't see reason? My legal team is prepared to demonstrate that these children belong in a stable, affluent environment. Not this." He waved a dismissive hand at the old porch, the chipped paint. Colin clenched his fists, trying to keep his cool. "Money doesn't make a home. We'll see you in court." Dennis sighed dramatically. Such stubbornness. Well, I attempted courtesy. Don't say I never offered to do this amicably. He turned to Benjamin and Caleb, voice chillingly calm. "You're making a grave mistake. Both of you." Caleb's chin trembled, but he forced himself to stand a little straighter. Benjamin swallowed, defiance in his gaze. Without waiting for a response, Dennis pivoted on his expensive shoes, heading back to the sedan. His lawyer cast a final contemptuous look at Colin and Daniel. "We'll meet in the courtroom then." In seconds, the car peeled away, leaving a swirl of dust and tension behind. Amanda stepped onto the porch, shoulders taut. She stared at the drifting dust, then turned to Colin. "He's scary," she whispered. Colin exhaled. "He is, but we're not backing down." Daniel placed a reassuring hand on Benjamin's back. "Stay strong. We'll pull through." Benjamin's jaw set. He can't scare us into giving up. Caleb exhaled, tears glinting in his eyes, but nodded in agreement. Amanda moved closer, gently placing her hand over Caleb's, a silent vow of solidarity. Colin gazed at them, heart pounding with protective resolve. "Court date's soon. Let him think he's invincible. We know the truth. These kids have found a real family here, and no amount of money can buy that." The wind gusted from the sea, carrying the brine-laced air over the cottage. And in that moment, despite the sting of Dennis's threats, a collective determination burned brighter than ever. Preparing for trial. The day after Dennis's visit, the cottage bustled like a cramped law office. Folders, medical forms, and character references sprawled across the living room floor. Daniel parked himself at the coffee table, diligently typing on a battered laptop. Colin paced near the window, occasionally stepping outside to breathe the salt air and gather his thoughts. Benjamin hovered around Daniel, helping sort old receipts, half-faded motel bills, and any paperwork from Linda's last months, anything that might prove the boys had good cause to run from Dennis's influence. Caleb, still cautious about rummaging too deeply in painful memories, mostly observed from the couch, offering details when asked. Amanda slipped in and out of the living room. Sometimes she helped gather items or label folders. Sometimes she vanished into her room to draw. Over the past days, she'd spoken more than she had in 3 years, combined short sentences, gentle questions. Each time a flicker of pride lit Colin's eyes. Finding Allie's, Daniel explained they might need additional testimony, someone who knew Linda personally, or at least could confirm her fears. He left for a short trip into the nearest town, hoping to track down an old friend of Linda's named Marta, who might confirm how Linda tried to shield the boys from Dennis. The same evening he returned, face lined with fatigue but carrying good news. "I found Marta," he told them. "She was Linda's co-worker at a cleaning company. She's willing to testify about Linda's anxiety and the threats Dennis made." Benjamin's relief was palpable. "So she'll tell the judge Mom was trying to protect us?" "That's the plan," Daniel replied. "Her statement could be gold. We also have the local clinic's notes on Caleb's bruises from when you first came here." Caleb shifted uncomfortably. "I don't like talking about that stuff, but if it helps..." Colin mustered a sympathetic smile. "It will. It shows you were hurt and abandoned and that Linda was forced to move constantly, not because she wanted to, but because she feared Dennis." A quiet moment. Late that night, after the documents were organized, A soft rain began pattering outside, gentle compared to the violent storms that had rolled through before. The kids dozed off in the living room, exhausted by the mental strain of dredging up the past. Colin found Daniel in the kitchen, leaning against the counter, staring at an old photo pinned to the fridge, a snapshot of Colin's wife holding a toddler, Amanda, their smiles forever frozen in time. "You miss her, huh?" Daniel said gently, noticing Colin's gaze. Colin swallowed, nodding. "Every day. Amanda lost so much I wasn't sure how to help." He flicked his eyes to the living room where Amanda now slept on the old couch, her face serene. "But maybe this is it. Helping these boys is helping her heal too. It's giving her a reason to speak again." Daniel's eyes softened. "Sometimes it takes seeing someone else in need to shake us out of our own grief." They fell into a comfortable silence, the hush of nighttime wrapping the house. Rain tapped lightly on the roof. Shadows shifted under the faint glow of a single kitchen bulb. "Tomorrow," Daniel said, "we'll finalize the medical check on Caleb. That doctor's note about slight malnourishment, it'll show the court how precarious their situation was before you found them. Combined with Marta's statement, we have a real case." Colin nodded, determination smoldering in his chest. "We won't lose them to Dennis." And as the gentle rain drummed its lullaby, the two men shared a silent resolve. They were forging a family of their own making, piece by piece, step by step, just strong enough to stand against any storm. A stormy night and a promise. The eve of the hearing arrived faster than anyone wanted. Clouds loomed in the evening sky, shifting from purple to black as a fierce wind pushed them across the horizon. The ocean roared with a fresh swell, crashing violently against the rocks below the cliff. It was as if nature itself mirrored the battle about to unfold in court. Inside the cottage, warm lantern light glowed against the windows. Colin, Daniel, and the kids ate a subdued dinner, grilled fish and simple vegetables, though none had much appetite. The tension hummed like a taut wire. Late-night fears. Around 9, the wind kicked up, howling past the walls. Rain battered the cottage in relentless sheets. A few leaks dripped into old pots and pans set out to catch the water. Caleb paced by the hallway, hugging himself. Benjamin tried to read a comic book but gave up, too distracted. Daniel quietly went over his notes one last time, verifying the list of evidence. Amanda drifted to her father's side. In the dim lamplight, her eyes flickered with worry. "Dad," she whispered, "I'm scared about tomorrow." Colin gently rested a hand on her arm. It was the first time she'd called him Dad in years. His chest tightened. "I know, sweetheart, but we'll face it together. You, me, Benjamin, Caleb, and Daniel. We're a team." She hesitated, then wrapped her arms around his waist in an embrace that nearly undid him. He breathed in the faint scent of her shampoo, all the pain and hope of the past 3 years crashing into that moment. "I trust you," she murmured, voice low but steady. Benjamin and Caleb, hearing the exchange, stepped closer. The thunder rumbled in the background, lightning momentarily illuminating their anxious faces. Daniel set his papers aside, giving them space. "You trust me too?" Colin asked gently, turning to the boys. Benjamin nodded, shoulders trembling just a bit. "Yeah, we do. It's just Dennis is so powerful. He can do anything." "That's what bullies want us to think," Daniel said, stepping in. "But the law is there to protect you. We've done everything we can to make sure the judge sees the truth." Caleb glanced at Amanda, who stood near Colin, tears brimming in her eyes. I don't want to leave," he whispered. "You won't," Amanda said softly, a mere wisp of sound under the pounding rain. "We won't let you." Colin's throat constricted. He blinked back emotion, ruffling Caleb's hair. Exactly. Beacon in the dark. The lights flickered once, but miraculously stayed on. Wind rattled the windows, water seeping under the front door. Daniel quickly placed a towel to block the incoming drips, then returned to the living room. They gathered around the flickering lantern, the storm's rage outside magnifying the intimacy of the moment. Colin looked at each of them, Amanda, who'd finally started to speak her heart. Benjamin and Caleb, who'd found a refuge here and refused to be torn away. Daniel, a friend who risked going up against a powerful enemy. In that moment, they forged a silent pledge. Come morning, they'd head to the courthouse. They'd lay out the truth, stand together, and trust that love and honesty could triumph over money and threats. Lightning lit the sky again, casting jagged shadows across the walls. Outside, the old lighthouse on a distant cliff blinked its beam, cutting through the dark. As the children curled up to sleep Amanda on the armchair, Benjamin and Caleb nestled on blankets in the living area. Colin and Daniel shared a final glance. "We're ready," Daniel said, quiet but resolute. Colin nodded, heart hammering. "Bring on tomorrow." And as the storm howled and battered the coastline, they clung to that lighthouse-like hope, a promise that no matter how treacherous the path, they would walk it side by side until the children were safe in a home built on something far stronger than fear. A courtroom. Above the sea. A crisp morning sun broke over the coastal town, painting the harbor in pale gold. Colin stood outside the small courthouse, perched on a bluff that overlooked the rolling ocean. The stone building, weather-worn and simple, felt more intimidating than any storm he'd faced. He was dressed in his best shirt and slacks, nothing fancy, just something that said he took this seriously. Amanda hovered at his side, wearing a gray sweater and neat jeans, her auburn hair pulled back. She looked older today, determined but anxious. Benjamin and Caleb stood close, and though their eyes darted with fear, each tried to steady the other with small reassurances. Daniel joined them, briefcase in hand, legal notes organized down to the last detail. "Ready?" Daniel asked quietly. Colin nodded, his stomach churning. "Let's do this." They filed inside, finding a modest courtroom with wood-paneled walls. A row of windows let in daylight, and beyond them the sea glimmered like a silent audience. Up front, an older judge, a man in his late 50s with thinning gray hair, settled behind a tall bench, spectacles perched on his nose. At the opposite table, Dennis waited. He wore a tailored suit, looking every bit the powerful tycoon. Beside him sat a stern-faced lawyer in a dark blazer. They spared only a withering glance for Colin and the children. The bailiff called the session to order. Everyone rose, tension crackling through the air like static before a thunderclap. Dennis's opening argument. Dennis's lawyer strode forward first. "Your Honor, my client, Mr. Dennis, is prepared to assume immediate guardianship of these children, Benjamin and Caleb. He can provide superior education, health care, and living conditions that far exceed anything offered by Mr. Colin." He paused, eyeing the name on his file, Colin Harrison. "We assert that Mr. Harrison is unqualified to care for them." Colin's pulse thudded in his ears, but he kept his expression neutral. Amanda reached for his hand under the table, giving it a small squeeze. "With all due respect," the lawyer continued, "the children have been living in a remote shack by the sea. My client has evidence they were never properly enrolled in school, that they have minimal medical oversight, and that Mr. Harrison's only income is from sporadic dock work." Dennis, seated behind his lawyer, shot a smug half-smile. The flick of his gaze told Colin, "You're nothing compared to me." Daniel's response. Daniel cleared his throat, stepping to the front. "Your Honor, the truth is, these children have thrived under Mr. Harrison's care. Prior to that, they were uprooted by Dennis's threats. Linda, their mother, ran in fear for her sons. We have documents, witness statements, and medical records to prove that Benjamin and Caleb are safer with Mr. Harrison than they ever were under Dennis's looming control." He offered a file to the judge. The judge flipped through pages, occasionally glancing up. A furrow grew between his brows. Daniel went on. "We're prepared to show you the environment Mr. Harrison has provided a stable, supportive home. The children themselves will testify. We believe you'll see a stark difference between the cold, manipulative intentions of Dennis and the genuine, nurturing care of Mr. Harrison." Across the aisle, Dennis's lip curled in distaste, but he remained silent. With the opening statements complete, the judge folded his hands. "Very well," he said, voice calm but firm. "I want to hear from the children directly. Let's proceed in an orderly fashion." Colin inhaled slowly, trying to calm his rattling nerves. This was it, the moment all their efforts led to. Amanda squeezed his hand one more time, and he managed a small nod of thanks. The sea beyond the windows sparkled, as if offering silent encouragement. The judge invited Benjamin to speak first. The 10-year-old stood up, knees shaky, but determination shining in his eyes. He glanced at Colin, who offered a nod of reassurance. Daniel stood beside him, an anchoring presence. Benjamin cleared his throat. "My name is Benjamin, and for a long time, me and my little brother Caleb, we were on the run with our mom, Linda." He paused, meeting the judge's gaze. Mom found out bad things about Mr. Dennis's company. She was scared he'd take us or harm us if we stayed. We moved around a lot, staying in motels, sometimes sleeping in the car. Dennis's lawyer tried to interrupt, but the judge held up a hand. "Let the child speak." Benjamin's voice wavered. "When Mom got sick, she still tried to protect us, but we got separated. We had no place to go. Then Caleb collapsed near a cliff. Mr. Harrison, Colin, found us. He saved Caleb's life. He gave us a real home, warm meals, a bed, a family. I don't want to leave that." His chin trembled. "I don't want to go with Mr. Dennis, who never cared about us before." A hush fell. The judge nodded. "Thank you, Benjamin. You may sit." Caleb stepped up next, smaller and trembling. He clung to Daniel's hand for courage. "I'm Caleb," he said softly, voice almost swallowed by the quiet room. I remember the day Colin found us. I was so cold and hungry. He brought me inside, gave me soup, took care of me. He never asked for money or anything. He just helped us." He took a shaky breath. "I don't know Mr. Dennis except he scared my mom. We ran because of him. I want to stay with Colin, with Amanda, and with Ben. They're my family now." A faint sniff echoed behind them, Amanda, biting her lip, eyes glistening at Caleb's words. Benjamin reached over and clasped her hand. Amanda's moment. The judge glanced down at a note, then up at the group. "I see mention of a daughter, Amanda. Would she like to speak?" A ripple of tension swept through the row. Amanda froze, uncertain. Colin's heart pounded he'd never push her to do something that terrified her. But Amanda rose anyway, eyes darting with nerves. She stepped forward, feeling Dennis's cold stare bore into her. Yet she kept her chin high. "I'm Amanda," she said, voice a thread above a whisper. "Colin's daughter." She swallowed, scanning the courtroom, her gaze landing on the judge. I didn't talk much for 3 years, after my mom died. I was scared lonely. But when Benjamin and Caleb came, something changed. We became a family." She held up a small piece of paper, a sketch she'd drawn. "This is my picture of us 4 people on a porch, by the sea." Her cheeks heated. "They showed me it's okay to let people in again." The judge leaned forward, intrigued. Amanda didn't hand him the paper, just held it up briefly before pressing it to her chest. "I don't want them taken away," she finished, trembling. "They belong with us." Silence cloaked the room, more powerful than any gavel strike. Even Dennis's lawyer seemed momentarily stunned by her quiet conviction. Daniel gently guided Amanda back to her seat, where Colin gathered her in a side hug, pride glowing in his eyes. Judgment amid the storm. The final arguments commenced. Dennis's lawyer tried to discredit Colin, painting him as an impoverished, unqualified single father who barely scraped by. He flashed photos of the small cabin, implied the kids lacked proper resources. Dennis himself took the stand briefly, boasting of his wealth. "I can provide private schooling, premium health care, opportunities these kids would never see otherwise," he declared, his tone clipped and superior. Daniel countered with a compelling timeline of Linda's flight, Marta's witness statement detailing threats from Dennis's associates. He presented medical records showing Caleb's initial condition and how it improved under Colin's care. Finally, he summarized the children's testimonies, highlighting the emotional stability, genuine love, and organic growth in Colin's home. A hush settled as the judge leaned back, fingertips pressed together. Rain battered the courthouse windows, a sudden squall sweeping over the coast. The overhead lights flickered. "All right," the judge said, voice echoing in the tense space. "I've heard both sides. This case is about the well-being of two children, Benjamin and Caleb, who have clearly endured significant upheaval. Their mother sought refuge from fear and intimidation. Mr. Dennis claims an ability to provide lavish resources, yet the children themselves express deep distress at the prospect of living under his guardianship. Benjamin's heart hammered. Caleb gripped his brother's arm. Amanda trembled, clasping Colin's hand. Every second stretched like an eternity. The judge continued, gaze drifting across the courtroom. In the eyes of this court, a child's welfare encompasses not just material comfort, but emotional security, trust, and love. Colin Harrison has demonstrated a stable, nurturing environment. The children's heartfelt testimonies confirm they feel safe and cared for in his custody. He paused, lightning illuminating the windows. Therefore, I rule to grant Mr. Harrison permanent legal guardianship of Benjamin and Caleb, dismissing Mr. Dennis's petition for custody. A collective rush of air escaped the children. Colin's shoulders sagged in relief. Amanda blinked back tears. Across the aisle, Dennis's face twisted with anger. He rose abruptly, muttering curses under his breath. His lawyer's expression fell, unprepared for this defeat. The judge rapped his gavel once, finalizing the decision. Court is adjourned. Returning to the quiet shore half an hour later, the storm outside passed as quickly as it came. Weak sunlight broke through the clouds, bathing the coastal road in a shimmering glow. Colin led the children out of the courthouse, Daniel at his side. People on the sidewalk glanced curiously, sensing some small triumph in their midst. Benjamin and Caleb hopped into the SUV, relief radiating from every pore. Amanda slid into the back seat next to them, a soft grin spreading across her face. Daniel climbed in front, briefcase balanced on his lap. Colin started the engine, heart still pounding, but this time from joy instead of dread. They drove toward home, the winding coastal highway that once felt so precarious. Benjamin and Caleb talked excitedly about the future, planting a small garden behind the cottage, maybe getting a dog. Amanda listened, nodding, occasionally tossing in a quiet comment or question. A simple celebration. As dusk approached, they arrived at the cottage to find the weather calm and the sea smooth like glass. Colin and Daniel carried out a small grill to the front porch, where they roasted fish and marshmallows. The children gathered around, laughter breaking out in spurts, as though they were finally letting themselves breathe. A gentle wind tugged at their jackets, carrying the scent of salt and seaweed. Amanda perched on the porch railing, glowing in the lantern light, sharing a moment of eye contact with Caleb that said, "We made it without words." Benjamin teased Daniel, asking if he'd ever take a day off. Daniel chuckled, promising a real break once this was all settled. Later, they piled into the SUV again, taking a short drive down the coast back to the very stretch of road where Colin had first seen the flutter of white fabric. The sky was a canvas of pink and orange, the sun dipping low over the horizon. Caleb slipped out carrying a small, folded cloth. He knelt by the roadside, placing it gently on the grass. "Thank you for stopping," he whispered, voice thick with emotion. Benjamin stood behind him, resting a hand on his shoulder. Amanda and Colin watched from a few steps away, hearts swelling. The wind picked up the cloth, dancing it along the ground before it settled. "Your mom would be proud," Colin said softly, recalling Linda's determination to protect her sons at all costs. Caleb looked back. "I hope so." Amanda slipped her hand into the boy's grasp, a quiet show of unity. Then they all piled back into the SUV, the last rays of sun painting the sky in fiery hues. Home at last. As they turned onto the final stretch, the cottage came into view, perched on its slope against a backdrop of serene waves. A golden glow from the porch light seemed to welcome them, no longer flickering with uncertainty, but burning steady and sure. They climbed out, inhaling the crisp, briny air. A hush fell, a tender gratitude filling the space. No more running, no more fear of being torn apart. Benjamin and Caleb were home, Amanda had found her voice, and Colin felt whole for the first time since his wife passed. Daniel gave Colin a friendly clap on the shoulder. "I'll get out of your hair for tonight. Go find an actual bed in town, but I'll be back tomorrow to tie up any loose ends." Colin nodded, voice husky with gratitude. "Thank you, Daniel. For everything." Daniel just smiled, slipping into his car and disappearing into the twilight. Standing on that porch, watching the taillights vanish, Colin turned to the kids. "We made it," he said, half laughing, half crying. "We're a family." Amanda reached out, looping an arm around her dad's waist. Benjamin and Caleb huddled in. None of them needed more words. The sound of the sea answered, rhythmic and kind, a lullaby of acceptance. A soft breeze carried the last echo of sun along the horizon. Their shadows stretched across the porch, 4 figures joined in an unbreakable bond. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new joys. But in that moment, under the warm glow of the porch light, they were exactly where they were meant to be. Together, by choice, on the path they'd chosen, the narrow road that led them home.